At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES broadcast with your host, Soulblazer.
Hello, welcome to Super NES Podcast, episode number 187. I am Greg, joined by Joe.
Hello.
And the two of us are coming at you once again with another Super NES game. Once again, this is Joe's pick because Joe was owed a couple episodes. And once again, Joe decided to go into the well of the obscure Japanese stuff for this time around. So don't worry, we got a much different game coming at you guys next time. So anyway. So what game do you want to cover this time, Joe? And why do you want to cover it?
This is called Super Family Circuit. And I wanted to cover it because, one, I'm not going to lie, I kind of mentioned in the last episode, I wanted something kind of, easy, laid back, and it looked like it was going to be fun. And there was recently on the particular website where we get our, I get my ROMs, they had an English translation. I was like, we might as well check it out.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised this game actually did get. I was a bit surprised this game actually did get like an English translation because it's a racing game. So there's not much text in the game anyway. But
right.
Apparently there are some big fans of the game because obviously they want to put the time and effort in to have it translated. So, but yeah. Anyway, yeah. So I think I said before in the past, I like racing games. Usually for me it depends upon the kind of racing game.
Yep.
I'm much more a fan of like the arcade style racing games, like for example Outrun and the Cruising Series and Daytona. I've played a little bit of the simulation games, like the Gran Turismos, which are fine. They're just like, I don't have the time or desire to put all those hours like the game when I'm already spending up to 10 hours in things like RPGs and simulations and things like that. So I'm much more, when it comes to racing games at least, I much more prefer like just a quick pick up and play, like relatively fast arcade style game.
Yeah.
So. Where do you sit upon this, Joe? Because I was actually surprised that you kind of picked a. I was kind of surprised that you picked racing games. I guess you must have some interest in the genre after all.
Oh yeah, I mean I've been playing racing games forever, and the more arcadey and absurd, I'm definitely on board. In recent years, my one of my favorite racing games, the franchise, the Burnout franchise, has been my favorite for a while. So that tells you right there what kind of racing I like. But through the 90s, it was Need for Speed and that whole franchise, Daytona, because I was a Saturn kid. So there's that. And then, of course, I jumped on the Dreamcast and got the Saturn there. But simulation-wise, I've been playing, over the past, 4 years or so, I've been playing the Forza Horizon games, which is a good balance between simulation and arcade. So you kind of have an open world, you can drive around, you can interact in other races and whatever else.
Yes.
But there's also there's ridiculous stunt challenges and things where you have to outrun a train and things like that. So I like a variety with my racers, and one of the main reasons I really picked this game is because the little bit that I saw of it, it instantly reminded me of Micro Machines on the NES. And I love Micro Machines on the NES. I still play Micro Machines on the NES. I bought the newer version for the Xbox One and was terribly disappointed because it looked like it was just kind of like an HD remake of the first one. I was super excited for it. Had some of the same levels and everything, but the controls just did not translate, and it was a sloppy game, unfortunately. But yeah, so I mean, that gives you an idea. I've been playing racing games forever, whether, you know.
Well, I don't know if that game supports it, but I know that the racing community is hardcore enough that they do make driving controllers. You know, in certain games like Gran Turismo, like you support that.
Yeah.
It's the only kind of optional controller you have these days. I mean, in the old days, there used to be all kinds of controllers out there.
Right.
But nowadays, things are kind of standard. I mean, like, you can still get some oddball controllers for sure, but the two main genres in which companies still heavily make controllers for are either flight sims or driving games.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I've never been hardcore enough to actually want to buy a driving controller, but I do kind of respect that.
So I do have a full-on steering wheel with the pedals and everything for
awesome, yeah.
I guess that'd be the 4th generation of consoles. It worked for the Xbox, the PS2, and the GameCube. And of course, you know, because it worked for the PS2, it also worked for the PS1. Yeah. So I have that beast in a box somewhere because it's cumbersome, you know, to set up and everything else, and they take up space. Yeah. That being said, my son's got one of the newer ones that released around the time of the PS3, Xbox 360 era, and it still works with not only, you know, the newer consoles, but also with the PC. And I use that thing for playing Forza on the PC, and it was amazing. It's got great force feedback. Like, you can actually feel the difference between the tarmac versus the grass. It was really fun to actually use one of those wheels. So yeah, believe it or not, this is like, if I had a choice, like, this is like one of my top genres for video games.
Yeah, well, you're definitely not alone in that. I mean, like, you know, the racing games have always been popular ever since they first came out, like, in the late 70s. But well, actually, racing games go way back even before that, because in the real old days, like the mechanical games of the 50s and 60s, one of the big genres that they used for that kind of game was racing of some kind, but. And that kind of translated also like to the first arcade games, and it's still very popular today. You know, like, it's probably the most popular genre in which I'm probably the least invested in.
Right.
With the possible exception maybe of the Souls franchise, perhaps. But, you know, having said that, Elden Ring is something I'm interested in checking out at some point. But anyway, yeah, because Arcade 1UP has released both Outrun and Ridge Racer as part of their lineup of cabs.
Yeah, I think Ridge Racer comes out in June, but the Outrun cabinet is one that I've definitely looked at and I have thought about. But I just, you know, it comes down to room, man. Don't have the room.
And there are companies also that will also make like what's called. And our companies that will make generic stand-up racing and sit-down racing arcade machines as well too, which are like a generic main cab, except they just come like pre-equipped like with the steering wheel and the pedals and the gear stick that you would need for it. And racing games are still very popular. Joe can back me up on this because the two of us recently went to our local Dave & Buster's, which is like a pretty good location for modern games. And the two biggest genres represented there are like shooting games and racing games. There's still a whole bunch of racing games there. You know, we got like Outrun, Mario Kart, you know, Batman, and probably a couple others I can't remember like right now. So. Racing arcade games are still very popular. I think partly because it's one of the harder genres to translate it accurately into home use. Right. Unless you spend all that money and space that you were just talking about to get the equipment and whatnot. Right. So, you know, that makes sense why it's so very popular like in the arcade scene.
Yeah, like one of my favorite racing games that I would go to the Warwick Mall as a teenager and pump dollars upon dollars into the machine so I could play it. Was a game called Racing Jam by Konami, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was street racing, and it was a full sit-down cab. You could play automatic or manual. You'd be an idiot for not playing manual. And if I was to put that in my basement here, it would take up like literally half of the living space down here. The thing's huge. It's pretty much the size of a car.
Then you also have the pseudo racing games that have come out over the years, where it's like driving is part of the game, but it's not the entire game, like Spy Hunter, like
Right,
APO.
right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like like handheld, there's handheld racing games that like so too, dedicated to run electronic games and whatnot. My favorite racing franchise has always been F-Zero. I really, I fell in love with the first F-Zero when it first came on Super NES because it's really one of the being a launch title. It really showed off very well what the system could do. Like those amazing graphics and the soundtrack and whatnot, and like the other games came over the years, the N64 or the GameCube and whatnot. They were very impressive.
Yeah, I obviously have love for the Super Nintendo version, but I mean, most of my F-Zero experience is F-Zero X from the 64, and that's by far my favorite. The one for the GameCube, I think, is better. As far as the racing mechanics,
I think so too. It's one of the handheld. It's one of the very, very few games, however, that actually make the motion sick because of all the upside down loop courses. But especially when you play like on a big TV set, it can really be jarring. But
and then I think it's GPA or GP Legends is the one for the Game Boy Advance. That one is. The better one. The first one that came out was okay, but it was kind of like a pseudo sequel to the Super Nintendo F-Zero. So, and it kind of retreaded that, and it was just kind of, this is safe, so they released it. But
But most of the racing games we're talking about so far, however, have either been literal or have been at least modified versions of NASCAR racing, stock car racing.
Yeah.
Which, like, I really, for a while, speaking about Dave & Buster's, they had, there was a NASCAR game, an official NASCAR game that EA made several years ago. That was a lot of fun to play because it actually had, like, radio announcers, like, in your ears and actually, like, an actual racer's ear that you'd expect and that kind of stuff. It was really fun.
Do you know why that game was so fun?
Well, for several reasons it was fun, but like, what's your reason?
So the reasoning it was so fun is because it was Daytona USA with an updated coat of paint. It was literally the Daytona USA 2 architecture with a NASCAR coat of paint over it.
That makes sense, actually, now you mentioned it. So,
and the game is fantastic. I agree. Yeah. And I'm a sucker. I still buy the NASCAR games. I don't buy them yearly like I used to, but I occasionally pick them up. Right now, NASCAR Heat 4 is the most recent that I own, which is 2 separated from what is current. So, and outside of that, I have NASCAR 15 that I still play. So it's like there's gaps, and whatnot because rosters change, and I'm not too huge on roster changes. That's why I still play like Madden 2017 or FIFA 2015 because like the game is the same. It's just the roster change, and I don't care about roster changes. But every time there's a significant change, that's when I end up upgrading and getting the newer game.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense. So, yeah. Anyway, I mentioned the fact that most of these games were either like stock car inspired because the game we're covering this time is actually F1 inspired. F1 racing is not as big in the U.S. as it is in the rest of the world. It's kind of like with soccer, like like how soccer is much popular elsewhere. But there are F1 races that are done here. But there are F1 races done here in the country now and then, and there are drivers, and there are American drivers who take part in it. And where that one racing is very popular in like Japan and Europe, and since it's a Japanese game, that makes sense. So. And this game's actually made by the company that really put racing games on the map way back when. This is a Namco game. Namco, of course, Namco doesn't need any introduction, but the series I'm talking about, like Pole Position, which really was a very, very popular series when it came out in like the early '80s. And that was also like F1 racing. So I'm not surprised. I'm surprised that Namco decided to go back to the well several years later and develop like a better version of Pole Position, basically. But yeah, the Super NES had a number of good racing games. We've only covered F-Zero on this podcast so far because of the fact that we also covered what's it called? Ivan Stewart's Off-Road Racing, which is also like a very fun game. So we will cover more racing games. I know there's also the Top Gear series was on the system as well too.
Top Gear series is so good
as well too. But this one's Japanese only. And I think the reason it was Japanese only is because, like I said, F1 racing is much more popular in Japan than it is in the US.
Yes, I agree.
But anyway, yeah. So like I said before, this game is an improved version of Relay Pole Position from many years previously. This game's actually the third game in the franchise. This is actually an improved version of a game that came out with the Famicom / the NES in 1988 called Family Circuit, which was also only available in Japan. As well. There was a sequel to that game. Called Family Circuit 91 came out in 1991, also for the NES / Famicom. So this is the second sequel to that game, and it came out in 1994. Like I said before, in Japan only. The game was published by Namco, but it actually was developed by a company called Game Studio, which was founded back in 1985 by former Namco employees, which is why that, and the two companies have had a very close relationship over the years, the same way the HAL and Nintendo have had a very close relationship. Namco publishes almost all their games, so they are officially still alive. Their list is being active, and they have an active website and everything. I've not seen them release any games anytime recently, though. So it looks like the company's just focusing upon like the mobile market only now. Because I don't see any console games they've released since 2001. And of course, being a Japanese company, most of their games were Japan only. They mostly. So Game Studio is mostly well known for other racing games too. They made other racing games as well beyond this. They also were the ones who got the rights to the Wizardry series in Japan. Wizardry being a very popular computer role-playing series. They got the rights to port the games to console and Japanese computers in Japan. So they did some of those games. Curiously enough, their only North American releases is the console versions of those games being released back in North America. So you had an American computer game that went over to Japan was ported to Super NES, and then that game was brought over to the US on the Super NES. So they did Wizardry Proving Ground for Mad Overlord, Wizardry Knights of Diamonds, and Wizardry 5. Like the ones that they developed, but the designer behind the Family Circuit series, including this game, is a guy named Mensabu Endo, who's pretty well known in Japan, and also really diehard arcade fans may know him. He was a person who developed two very popular arcade games, Xevious and the Tower of Druga. So and of course Game Studio also was the one who developed those games as well too. So there is some pedigree behind this game. Having said that, however, this game's not really radically different over the NES games. I took a look at them briefly. I briefly on YouTube. Really, this game just simply has a new coat of paint on it for 16-bit graphics, has a few new options on it, and that's pretty much about it.
You got that.
They definitely, well, nothing wrong with that, especially with like a racing game. They just went to the, if it ain't broke, don't fix it strategy.
But you know, playing this, I had to go back and look at the NES game. I didn't know about the 91 one, so I looked at the first game, and I was kind of slightly disappointed that it was like, oh, they just kind of copied their own work.
Well, I mean, the original game reviewed very well in Japan.
Yeah, no.
So
you know, it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, when the original game came out, Famitsu, which is the biggest Japanese game magazine, gave it a score 32 out of 40. So they really didn't see a need, I guess, to like reinvent the wheel with this. Yeah. Having said that, there are some nice options. The game menu is surprisingly robust for a game of this age. There are 6 different. You actually have 6 different selections. You have the time attack mode, which is basically kind of like a beat your own time mode. You have the sprint race mode, which I believe. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding of this is just pretty much like a one course race. Kind of shorter version like the endurance mode. So
endurance, there's longer races.
Yes. The endurance is bread and butter. The endurance is the main one.
The sprint if I remember correctly, you do multiple races, right?
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
That's the quote unquote story mode, if you want to look at it that way.
Yes, right. But there's also practice mode also where you can practice your skills, and there's also a garage because you're able to, as you win races like earn money, you're also able to modify your car. So, there's also like an option, there's also an option mode. You're able to enter your own name. You're able to manipulate, the controller set and how you want the control. The controller pad to be laid out, which is nice. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
The controls are pretty basic. You have a gas, a brake. You can upshift and downshift, and you also have what's called overtake, which allows you to do kind of like a boost, such that you get past like another car. So you can also change how many laps, body color, your skill level. Like I said, a lot of options for a game of this time period, which I was surprised by.
Yeah. One thing I also like is you have, with the series, you have 3 different tours that you can do. So you got like the Japanese prototype. You have the Japanese Formula 1. Which they just call Formula, and then they have the World Championships, and obviously that's your, easy, medium, and hard. And I like that. I like the fact that they gave you that option. It wasn't just, okay, here's, a car, here's some tracks, and good luck. So that was kind of nice. I also like that. It kind of bothered me at first, but as I played it, it felt a little better. But at first I was very confused by the fact that you can't make contact with the computer drivers. You actually drive right through them. So, not gonna lie, in recent games like Forza, I'm that guy who can't drive and will go full speed into the corner and just collide with other cars to get around and through that corner, just to keep my position in the race. And I couldn't do that here. I ended up in the grass quite a few times, and that grass is unforgiving. In this game, it's like you got to stay on the concrete. If you get off the concrete even for a little bit, you can almost kiss that race goodbye. It is brutal.
Yes. So the garage gives you the garage gives you the ability to enhance 8 different parts of your car. One of those parts is just colors, like it's cosmetic only. But the other 7 parts, I'll give you a leg up in one part of your car. There's the engine, transmission, brakes, suspension, aero, which is the aerodynamics, steering, and the wheels. So And then you can also, after you have your selections all set, you can also decide like when to race it. Like Joe mentioned, there are various countries. There's like Belgium, Italy, Portugal, Spain, Australia, Namco, which is the old name for Namco, so it's a Japanese course. There's some other Japanese courses like as well here too. So yeah, like I said, I was very surprised by just how robust the options were in this game because at least it definitely looks like there are more options added to this game, added to this version of the game than there was the NES one. So I can appreciate that. At least the 16-bit version of the game wasn't just like a fresh paint job.
Right.
So. The racing map is it takes a bit to get used to, only because this is an over-the-top racing game, which I'm not that used to. I have not played too many over-the-top racing games. Most racing games are either like behind the car, or they're zoomed out over the top, like you see the whole course, like on that one screen, the Super Sprint or like the Grab and Steward. But this one, there is a mini map that you can have. There are mini maps you can look at to see where you are and what's coming up at you. Of course, also like your speed and time and your gear and whatnot. But yeah, it's both good and bad. The choice I think to have this as a bird's eye view. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Joe, as well. I like the fact it's pretty unique. To have this perspective, and it does work. It does make the game, however, more difficult and frustrating because you can't see as well around you as you would like to see. Because I don't know why they decided to do the graphics this way. I understand they're keeping it like the early Famicom games, right. But not being able to. But your field of view is definitely limited, especially as you just said. With those curves, the curves. Unless you definitely have to run the race several times to get the hang of the course, to figure out where you need to brake, where you need to return, that kind of stuff. Because the map does you no favors like that.
Yeah, this was so the first couple races I did were really frustrating just because I had to learn the momentum of your car going into the corners, how much speed there is, and how your car is going to handle, and then how punishing the grass is, because in some games you just get in the grass and it's fine, it's whatever, you just blow right through it. And this game, like I said, punishes you for hitting that grass, but in my opinion also punishes you for being quote unquote too fast going into corners. I didn't use the brake once. It was all feathering the gas to get around those corners. And even then, that wasn't the best strategy. I probably should have learned how to brake a little bit more going into the corners. But, it's your typical racing game. It's just, it's from a top view, so that feels weird. It feels almost like Super Sprint or a Super Off-Road. That sort of. Well, it's not really super off-road. More like Super Sprint, and definitely, like I said, Micro Machines. Like that was the big game that I could think of that I can compare this to. It feels like Micro Machines, and that's not a bad thing. I just wish that the controls were a little bit better. I think that would help the game immensely. But outside of that, I mean, it's your typical racing game.
Yeah, I had problems with controls too, but I really don't know how much to blame the controls because I'm like racing games usually have loose controls anyway.
Right.
So I really didn't know how much fault was assigned to that area. I just chalked it. You may be right. I just chalked it to me being not being very good at the game.
Yeah, I felt like I put in enough time and raced enough different tracks, which that's another thing we can talk about is the assortment of tracks. Oh my god.
Yeah, I was just looking at
I want to say there's 35, if not 40 tracks. It feels like there's a lot of tracks there.
I was just looking at a picture of the series to remind me about that, and there's sounds like 7 series that you can pick from,
yeah.
Which also which also have their own bunch of tracks. Yeah, there are a lot of tracks in this game, and some of the tracks are very similar, but some of the tracks are also very, very different.
Right.
So, some of them have, some of them almost have, some of them kind of reminded me of like racing the city, because of the way that the roads are laid out and like whatnot. So, but yeah, so like I said, for a game of its time period, like for just like very robust, like about options and races and whatnot. So, I just felt the greatest difficulty of this game was not so much trying to beat the opponent. The biggest obstacle was trying to finish the darn thing to begin with. So
Right.
That's the challenge that's the challenge that I had the biggest time with. Did you feel the same way, Joe, or how'd you
like I said, the general challenge was just for me. It was wrestling with the controls, and that's not a knock on the controls. I think that's me personally. I'm always a straight up gas guy, even if I'm playing Forza where it's simulation and you have to be articulate and everything else. Like I am the guy, even in real life. I am going to ease off my gas before I hit my brake. That's just how I am. That's how I've always been. So, I play that way even in my games, and it was no different with this one. But like I said, maybe it is the controls, you know what I mean? And maybe it's not.
Yeah.
Like, like you said, maybe it's us. I don't know. I spent enough time with this game to be able to make an analysis. But at the same time, I feel like if this was all I had and I was able to spend, waking hours playing this, would I feel the same? That was what I was coming to. And, I don't know if I would, Maybe I would end up being an expert, you know what I mean?
Sure.
When I was younger, Micro Machines was my jam. Nobody could beat me. I blew through that game I don't know how many times. But as a... now 40-year-old man going back to that game. The first few tracks I'm really good at. As soon as I hit the pool table, it doesn't matter who I'm playing as because it really doesn't make a difference in that game. The pool table always messes me up. I always screw up, and it's like I know those tracks like the back of my hand. So it's just it could be age. You know what I mean? My reflexes just aren't what they used to be, and I'm okay with that.
Could be, yeah,
you know what I mean? I understand it. I'm not going to leverage it against the game. And I'll be the first to blame myself before the game. But this was a fun experience. I really liked it.
Yeah, it's a tough game, but like I said before, I really don't know how much. It's really hard to decide. The two of us really struggling with where the biggest challenge of this game lies.
Right.
I don't. For most races, I don't think it's the AI. The AI is good, but I think in most races, like I said before, you're more focused about trying to actually just finish the race with good time. Your time and worrying about trying to beat your opponent.
Right.
Because. But again, nothing wrong with that because, like I said, and then again, most of my experience has been playing NASCAR style games. As we talked about the place for the podcast. F1 racing is a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
You need a whole different
Right.
So you need a whole different strategy to be able to do well in a race of that type. So, reflexes will help. Reflexes going to take you so far. But for sure. But yeah. So the graphics in this game are pretty good. We mentioned the coat of paint the game's given. It's not it's not amazing, but as far as a racing game goes, it does look very nice.
Yeah, it's serviceable.
The cars are very bright. Cars look good. There's some very cute anime style scenes that come up as you're doing things like picking races and working a car and whatnot, which is a nice touch. Graphics. The cars are large. They're well detailed. They actually look like cars. So cars, not like mini machines.
Right.
So I do appreciate that. Music and sound effects are also pretty good. Music is like standard fare, not amazing, but like amazing, but the music good enough to keep in the mood you're racing. The sound effects are very impressive. The squealing on the tires as you go around the curves is spot on. I thought. Definitely is like a great sound effect.
Agreed.
So challenge this game. Like I said, most of the challenge of the game is just like trying to learn the courses and do well and once you practice and trial and error, and you eventually get good at doing it. Like I said before, it's not the most difficult racing game out there. I do appreciate how many options the game has, because at least that way you're able to like crank things down a bit and be able to kind of ease yourself into it. I guess I can. As I guess in summary, this is a better racing game than I thought it was going to be. Once again saying that this game is an F1 style game and not a NASCAR / stock car style game, which most Americans are more familiar with. If you're a fan of you're a fan of F1 racing games, like Pole Position, for example, it definitely is worth checking this one out. Like I said before, there is an English patch out there if you want to get the game in emulation or pick up a card to use for your clone system. But it's not critical. You certainly can understand the game fine, just to find like it's native Japanese, because it is like racing.
Yeah.
But it's a very detailed, feature-rich game for time period, which if it's time period 1994, which is a very pleasantly surprised with. I don't think I'm going to be going back to this, but I think this is like a fun game for sure. I don't remember seeing a multiplayer option in this game, Joe. Did you see one? I think it's like one player only.
I believe it is one player only. I also did not see a multiplayer option, but also like I didn't go looking for one either. So there's that.
Well, yeah. I don't think there is, because multiplayer this time period they would have had to do split screen,
right.
Which is fine. I think multiplayer would have enhanced the game, the enhanced the game's value for sure. But as it is, it's a racing game. It's a racing game in the 16-bit, generation. So it's a very good F1 racing style game on console. There are also some very good F1 racing style games on computers as well too, of like the time period. But as far as like F1 racing games on consoles, this is certainly one of the best ones of the time period, I think. I said before, if you are a big racing fan of this type, it's great. I think this game is worth. I think this game worth playing. Does it hold up today? Like I said, that kind of depends on your preferences. If you are a racing game fan who enjoys F1 racing, who enjoys 16-bit style games, who enjoys difficult games, then certainly it's still fun to play. Having said that, I do fully acknowledge and realize that's a very small subset of the fan base out there for sure. The game itself is fundamentally solid, and there wasn't. Even though it doesn't differ too much from the original NES games, it's like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So it is a. I was pleasantly surprised by this game. I didn't love it, but minus the controls and the choice of it, or and choice of an over the top camera angle, I can't really find the major faults in the game.
Nope, I agree.
Do you have any final thoughts or anything else that you wanted to say to add on to what I just said, Joe?
No, I think versus everything with everything that we have said, I think that you should at least check it out in ROM form, because that's going to be the easiest way to get it. Outside of that, if you're a collector and you're looking for it, I think Greg will be able to tell you what those values are here in a bit. But I can't imagine this game is too pricey. But then again, we've been surprised on this show before. So hold off if you're a collector until Greg tells you how much it's going to be. But check the game out. It's worth at least a half hour of your time. It's worth at least a couple races. I can guarantee you'll have at least a little bit of fun with it. If nothing else, the time trial and just, with a bunch of friends, see who can do the best laps. I found there were quite a few tracks where there were multiple paved surfaces, where there was one where it looks like 3 tracks in one, and you could legit just go through the very first turn. It's the shortest way around the track, and literally pull a 10-second lap, and it was fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, definitely. I could not find anything talking about the game when it came out in Japan, as far as ratings or anything else like that. Like I said, even though the original game did very well, this game kind of I wouldn't say it was a terrible game, but it certainly did not get a lot of attention like it looks like. So modern contemporary reviews of the game give good marks, 4 to 5 stars basically. As far as that goes. So, and being a racing game and also being a Japanese game, it's not very expensive to get. Expensive to get this game. With a couple warnings about that, which I'll get into in just a moment. It's a very interesting price chart for this game, because it's certainly one of the more rare games on eBay as far as copies sold. But there are copies of the game currently listed. So I think you want to buy a good price. A good price for this game. So you may just want to be patient, because being a Japanese racing game, there's copies out there, but if you want to get the game without paying an arm and a leg for it, you may have to show some patience. Because I found 26 copies of this game currently being listed for sale, and I did research on this recently. Only 3 copies of the game actually sold recently. Period. So, and most of these from Japan, but there were a few. But there are some copies of the game that can be available for sale from North America as well too. Since only 3 copies of the game sold recently within the last 30 days of doing the research on this in mid-April 2022, I'll just tell you the pricing. Card only version of the game from North America sold for $13. Okay. And the CIB copy and 2 CIB copies from Japan sold for $20 and $31.50.
And that was probably mostly shipping, right?
Yeah. A lot of it's shipping. So, for copies currently being listed, the pricing that the people looking for the game can range from $9 to $33 for the carts, and $20 to $28 for CIBs. That's why I said wildly ranging price as far as copy being listed. Cart pricing is fine. I think if you want the game for CIB, you may want to just be patient, because I said those copies, the two copies I could find that sold recently averaged $30 for sale pricing. So so if you are a collector and you want this game, have some patience, because you can certainly snag a game for complete for cheaper price than the $150 that people are trying to get for this right now.
Definitely. So. Be patient.
But yeah, $13. $13. I think the card's a pretty good price. So, could not find any reproductions. Could not find any. I think mostly because of the fact that this is kind of a more obscure, rarer game, and also because of the fact that the translation patch, while nice, is not very critical. Right. So, not compared to our game from last time. So, where translation was very helpful and very much needed. So. But anyway, decent pricing, for sure. So, I could not find any evidence. I was a bit surprised also. I went looking in Namco's collections, because Namco, of course, has released a lot more collections in Japan than they have released here in North America. Even though they have released a lot of collections of their games here in North America, obviously Namco has had more games come out in Japan than they have in North America, so there are a lot more collections. I think for the PlayStation, they released something like 10 collections, which was Japan only. So, I couldn't find any evidence this game was ever included like in a collection. So as probably because of the fact that those collections are usually arcade games only, and this game never had, and none of the games in the franchise ever had an arcade port. So much to my surprise, this game's never gotten re-released.
Still interesting,
So Namco,
just because it looks like this the family branding on this game extends to other sports titles in Japan.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
So like I came
that's
across
true.
like Super Family Tennis and whatnot. So like I could see like a sports compilation at some point, you know what I mean? But maybe it's one of those where Konami, you know, feels like, okay, well, yeah, they were cool. And the Namco, I'm sorry. I have Racing Jam on my mind. That, you know, Namco was like, hey, you know, we've, you know, these games just haven't aged as well as other arcade, you know, a lot of arcade games, they're almost timeless,
Sure.
you know what I mean? Whereas like these console games, you know, for the most part, you know, some of them age out, you know, and that's just how that is. And
True.
it's not worth putting out a collection or something like that. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a fun game. And I, you know, honestly, if they had a collection with the family franchise, I'd probably go for it, you know, just to see, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Like this game alone, I think would be worth like the $20 they'd probably charge for the collection. You know what I mean? So,
Right. But interesting racing game. So once again, Joe, you like did well picking a very interesting game at least. You know, not only not all these games are winners, but at least these games are like very interesting to talk about at least.
Yeah.
So, but I am, you know, so I'm appreciative of that. So thank you again for, you know, like bringing us like a pretty fun game. For
absolutely.
us.
And I promise we'll stay out of Japan for a while.
Well, at least for
Right.
Because next time, you know, I'm very pleased. So I'm very pleased to finally be able to come public like this, because we've been playing this episode for like for months now at this point. But we are going to be having a special guest episode next time around, where we're going to be having two guest hosts on the podcast, people who've been here in the past. Ferg from the Atari 2600 Game by Game podcast, and Phil, aka the No Square Gamer, from his YouTube channel, who are going to be joining us to cover a game celebrating its 30th anniversary very shortly, which blows my mind because it's like, darn, I feel old now. But yeah, we're going to be covering certainly one of the greatest games of Super NES, if not one of the greatest games ever made. Period. And I do honestly feel that way. Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past,
Which, by the way, turned 35 like 2 days ago. I think Friday was the 35th anniversary.
You mean the original game, right?
Yeah.
Legend of Zelda.
No, for
No, 1992.
92. Oh, so that's 30 years. My bad.
Yes,
30.
I said 30 years.
Well, I thought you said celebrating 30 years soon, and it passed. So that's why I was bringing it up. My bad.
Yeah, I think that because we have pushed this game back a few weeks because of like real life and whatnot. I think when we actually were planning upon doing this, it was more in timing like of its release. You're right. So April 13th
there we go.
was North America, but close enough. 30 years. So,
30 years and 3 days. No, it's all good.
Yeah. So yes, look forward to that like next time. So you know, let's be. We're trying to, you know, I always want to space out the heavy hitters for the system. So because they're too easy to just to go into the catalog of like the 100 best Super NES games and whatnot, and just bang these guys out. But you know, Zelda certainly is one of the biggest games on the system we've not covered yet. So, trying to think what else are some other heavy hitters we haven't covered yet. I know we haven't gotten to Super Mario World 2 yet, which Yoshi's Island, which we're going to cover eventually sooner or later. That certainly was a that certainly was a big release. Joe, what do you think are some other like big games we probably haven't covered yet?
Well, I'll tell you, at some point during this podcast, we will cover BS Legend of Zelda. And if you don't know, that's
yes.
the
Yep,
Satellaview
so.
version of the first Legend of Zelda game, done with the updated graphics for A Link to the Past, and that is such a great game. And it's a great companion piece with the Link to the Past. So that's one of those games I definitely want to talk at some point. As far as heavy hitters, that
I was just looking at the chart right now, but I was just looking at the chart right now. Which games sold the best in the system, and in the top 25, we already have covered a lot of those games. The two games in the top 25 that we have covered yet. 3 games. I already mentioned Yoshi's Island, but the other two big games we have covered yet are Pure Instinct, and Secret of Mana. So we are those are also great games. Those are also games we're going to cover.
Definitely. And I'd have to look at what's been covered and what hasn't to fully answer the question. But if it's been covered, I would hope that at some point maybe we can retread the ground of Super Metroid, because that's a game we haven't talked about yet.
We haven't talked about that. Chris joined us by my podcast before because he's a huge Metroid fan. And that actually still. I actually speaking about podcasts. I actually just looked at the ratings not that long ago. That episode's still our number one episode as far as downloads.
There you
go. So, but anyway, so look forward to Zelda next time. That should be a 4 of us talking about the game. That should be a fun episode. A fun episode for sure.
Definitely.
And Joe. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the first time you played the whole game from start to finish.
Spoiler: I still haven't finished it.
But it will be the first time you played the game start to finish.
But it will be the first time that I've played the game.
Cool.
From start to wherever I get to by the time we record.
It'll be fun to have a first perspective on the series. That's for sure. So, but. Well, you got 2 more weeks left, so. All right, so thank you again, everybody, for joining us as always. We appreciate it. If you want to check us out on Facebook, we have a group on there, or you can also send me an email directly if you want to at the SNESpodcast@yahoo.com with your questions, comments, feedback, suggestions, etc. Joe, can they reach you?
I have a very public Facebook. Just a warning, it's not the best, but it's there. And you can always find me on Twitter at JOESUX30.
Okay. Thank you again, everybody for joining us as always. Stay safe, be well. We'll catch you again later.
Bye.
Take care, all.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Super power.